All right. So who the heck are we? Is now part of the Globally Ballin Network, part of the Globally Ballin Network. If you want to know more about the sister shows or even who the heck are we, go to YouTube, go to who the Globally Ballin channel, click on that bell icon to subscribe. Part of the Globally Ballin Network is the Globally Ballin podcast, where they take a surface level view of sports and opportunities around the world. Another show is called 5 Minutes With, where they, per players themselves, take a 5 minute analysis of plays and the whatnots. If you want to know more about volleyball, go to Hang Time with Denise Tensai. They're all about volleyball. Now, if you want to know about the golden era of the PBA, look for an eternity of basketball, where they had guests like Norman Black, Tim Cohn, Freddie Hubalde, even Alan Kaidik. That is an eternity of basketball. Now, this show is sponsored by Chops to Go, New Era, Hinalaban Farms, Georgie's Delight, Arfatelli, Cereal Milk Ice Cream, and Cuts Apparel. Now, if you want to know more about Cuts Apparel, they're already doing their cycling line. So if you're a BMXer or a mountain biker or just a cyclist, or actually not just a cyclist, or if you are a cyclist, go to Cuts at Cuts Apparel PH. Now, tonight, we actually want to honor uh, one of, I think one for me, a very good man, a good president. He passed away a week ago. I just want to honor President Benigno Noynoy Aquino, and one of his quotes, I believe, is rings true as of today. To the Filipino people, may we never lose our patience with the ways of democracy, and may we never take it for granted or be passive in its defense. President Noynoy, you did well for the Philippines. Saludo kami sa inyo. Now, for our guest today, we have, I'm sure they're waiting in the background for a long time. We have a PBA historian. Do you know there's actually a PBA historian? And I'm sure Claro will be so happy to hear all the stories of the yesteryears of and the golden era of the PBA. It's it's almost the same as now, but you'll hear all the stories. I grew up loving the PBA in the '80s. You know, watching Mon Fernandez, Francis Arnay. So I know most of the history of the PBA. But unlike this guy, Mr. Jay Mercado, no, Jay, kabangalan mo to, so sorry na lang, I disclaimer, baka I might call you Jay de la Cruz. So Jay Mercado is now part of the show. Hi, Jay.
Hello everyone, Sir Jay de la Cruz, of course, is my ethnic friend. Claro, of course, and Claudia. Thank you for having me.
You know, si Jay, I know Jay because I sometimes help in an eternity of basketball. Jay is what I call the sessionist of an eternity of basketball. Kung pag missing si Noel Zarate, na laging missing, yan, pinch hitter, yan, si Jay Mercado. Yeah, so again, his name is mentioned in the show. His name has always been mentioned in the show. I don't think I'll mention it anymore. So welcome, Jay Mercado. If do you see two people in this photo, we had one of our guests before, episode 45. He is currently still one of the PBA's anchor. No, we heard his voice during the FIBA qualifiers, Mr. Charlie Cuna. Apparently, he's going to be silent today kasi ano lang daw siya. Supporting actor. Supporting actor.
Maniwala ako.
Yeah, so there you go. So welcome, Mr. Jay Mercado and Charlie Cuna to the show. Again, to Charlie Cuna.
Salamat.
Welcome.
Salamat sa inyong muling pagtanggap sa akin dito. Sabi ko nga kanina, repeat offender na ako. Pangalawang beses ko na rito.
Thank you, Charlie.
Ayan. And in fact, if I could just put this here, yung Sota t-shirt ni Mr. Cuna, katsaparan ba din yan ata, di ba? Jay, Caro?
Yes.
Ayun, see? Yeah. So we would like to say thank you to Cuts for this shirt. You know. So let's start. Okay. So, Jay,
Yeah.
for the sake of Claro and Jay, Jay de la Cruz.
Kahit si Claro na lang muna.
Oh,
Kahit
si Claro.
Claro.
Okay lang.
Si
Okay lang.
Claro,
Yes.
This is really a weird question. So, how did actually the PBA start in terms of the basketball scene here in the Philippines? No.
Well, medyo rich ang history ng PBA, but I guess it started basically from a renegade group of investors. No, they all were part of the MICA back then, which was the primary or the top commercial league in the Philippines. All of these were all amateur players, and it was an amateur league as well. Anong nangyari, they got frustrated with the BAP because similar to what we had a couple of years ago or a few years ago, they had the hugot system. Wherein, whenever there was an international tournament, they would ask the players to leave their respective teams so that they can form the national team. Ang nangyari, because of this, na i-impede yung progress ng teams nila, at the same time, yung championship aspirations nila, medyo nadidiskarel because the pull out of the top players nangyayari, no? And eventually, in frustration over yung lack of long-term planning that the BAP had back then, they decided to put up a professional league, which basically will make them steer clear from the BAP kasi magiging under na ng games and amusement board yan. At the same time, you can't have professional players playing for the national team back then. So that was how it started. No? So 9 team owners banded together. You had the Silverios, the Floros, the Yuyangs, the Senens, of course, no, of 7-Up, the Cosetengs, the Elzaldes. They formed together and they decided to come up with a professional basketball association called the PBA, and it was opened in April 99, 1975. So that's basically how it started.
Okay. So when it was said amateur, so meaning that they still had all these players come into the PBA, still had a day job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they were supposed to. That's basically the concept of the MICA back then. It was formed in 1939, no? Pero nung time na yun, it was basically a commercial league of employees representing their respective companies. So ganun talaga simula niya, no? Nangyari because normally nangyayari rin niya ngayon na may hugot system din, umihila na ng mga magagaling na players until eventually naging commercial league yan that featured top collegiate players na. So they started recruiting from different schools, no, and they gave them allowances. At that time, they were not allowed to be given salaries. So they were given allowances to actually suit up for the respective teams. And that's the reason why you had commercial teams like Philippine Airlines back then in the MICA. You had Squib. You the vitamins, the vitamin E. Yon. So yung mga ganung brands were and of course you had Toyota or Komatsu, you have Crispa, Utex, daming textile firms noong time na yun kasi sagana ang Philippines sa textile sa textile industry. So that is how basically it started. So that eventually may mga players pa rin like sina Manny Paner, when they interviewed sa Atty Basketball, they used to actually how do you call this? They were employees of San Miguel Corporation. So they were given day jobs, and then at night they were allowed to practice and then play in the commercial league after.
Okay, Jay, I'm sure my two co-hosts here are wondering, how you became a PBA historian. I think Claro has a question for you.
Go. Sige.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how did you become a PBA historian? Did you take up history in college and said, I want to take this track?
No. I actually, ang layo ng course ko. I took up hotel and restaurant administration at UP. So malayo talaga. But when I was 7, you have to remember I have 9 siblings. 7 of them are brothers. And 5 of those 7 brothers are into sports, whether as a fan or as a player. And it was common back then since isa o dalawa lang naman ng TV sa bahay normally ng time na yon. Kapag sila may hawak, pag sila yung magbukas ng TV, sila may hawak ng TV. So kung pinapalabas yung MICA or ABC Wide World of Sports, kailangan sumabay ka. So no choice ka. You have to watch it also, But because of that, nailigan ko rin, nakakasabay ko sila, part of the bonding session that we had also. And that my first game that I think I remember watching was the Philippines versus Korea game in the 1973 ABC. No, that was basically the finals kasi at that time parang 7-0 sila yung record nila. And coincidentally naman, or curiously, ang nangyari is yung last game would be between the two teams, no? So nangyari, kung sino manalo doon, siya magcha-champion. Hindi uso na ng finals eh. So kung sino lang mag-top nung with the best win-loss record will win the ABC back then. So I think that was my first encounter with basketball. And then syempre, sunod-sunod yan, 1975, I became a fan of the PBA. By 1976, I was 8 years old back then. You ask me all the players of every single team in the PBA, including their jersey numbers and their heights and their playing positions, kabisado ko, memorize ko. Not because of anything else, but because I was devouring the pages of all the broadsheets back then. No, Times Journal, we had the Times Journal and the Daily Bulletin at that time. So pag lumalabas sa roster, yung mga rosters for example, andun lahat ng details na may memorize ko yun. For an 8-year-old who's so hungry with information back then, wala namang internet noong time na yun, it became a routine on my end. No? Until, I guess, siguro, lumabas nailabas ko na talaga yung passion ko noong 2002 because there was a sports forum on the defunct PBA.ph page. Yung PBA.ph page used to be the website of the PBA back then. Tapos may forum doon. So, I started writing there. I started joining. I joined the discussion, and somehow one thing led to another. And I guess the biggest story that I had back then was when I wrote the history of Ginebra. Wow. And alam mo naman yung Ginebra, kung gaano kasikat, no? So I had to write it because a lot of people remember Ginebra from the time when Jaworski came in 1984. What many don't remember was that Ginebra, which used to be called Gilby's Gym, joined the PBA in 1979. So I had to bring that background muna. And then that's when I started. That's when somebody posted that on Wikipedia, and the rest is history basically. Nangyari na.
Claro's just stunned, I'm sure.
I have a bunch of stuff about Ginebra.
1979.
I want to save it for later. Yes,
Okay.
yes. But I got something for Charlie. So ayun, JPM mentioned that PBA started out as like a league just for employees to play against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what was that trajectory?
Sorry, Mika. It started.
There you go. Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ano yung trajectory there where it started out amateur or even semi-pro, then eventually naging pro league, it got so competitive. And then it's where we are today. Full-time players play for pay.
This is for me.
Yeah,
medyo
yeah.
medyo nawala ka ng konti kasi klaro sa feed ko Okay. So parang you want to know about the progression, how did it become what it is today?
Yes.
From
yes.
that time. Well, if you really look at it, it's a slow grind for the first 10 years. Because I know for the fact that at least for the Elizalde group, for example, which joined in 75, pioneer member ng Elizalde group with the name of Tanduay, no? The original Tanduay team. This is not the Tanduay that you know already, claro, because the Tanduay that you know with Eric Menk and all of that's a different team altogether, not connected except for the name, no? There were employees, some of the players were employees of the Elizalde group of companies till the mid-80s. Okay, so kung 75 yon until mga 85, 86, meron pa silang mga ibang players who were actually employees of that team, no? But slowly, because of what Jay said earlier, they were recruiting players out of college already, and then by 85 there was a draft already and all of that. So it really just became like the NBA. It's not purely employees already, of course, anymore. But during that transition period, what happened there was that certain players would then not work for the company, but would put up stores connected to the products that were being sold by some of the companies, di ba? For example, kung player ka ng Shell, hindi ka empleyado ng Shell, pero nagtayo ka ng gas station, ng Shell. Humingi ka ng franchise for the gas station, di ba? Or if you're with San Miguel, you put up a poultry farm somewhere where San Miguel will get its chicken, di ba? From you, or something like that. Or you'll put up a beer distributorship in the area where you live, di ba? Let's say you're from the south, di ba? So hingi ka sa San Miguel ngayon ng rights to be the distributor in that area. So there were still remnants of that employer-employee, but remnants na lang. It wasn't a direct employer-employee relationship anymore at the time. By mid-80s, tuloy pa till late 80s yan. I think it's really the 90s when all of that ended, perhaps, na really because of the draft was in full swing, and then you're recruiting players really just to play. I mean, wala nang ibang obligasyon for the company except to appear at promotions, mga events, di ba, where you're supposed to endorse and make appearances and sign autographs and hug and kiss people, and di ba, and all of that, di ba? But yeah, so it was basically maybe a 10 to 15 year shift, di ba, from lots of guys working for the companies till there was nobody anymore really working for the company. That's how I see it.
Okay.
Pero yeah.
So,
Sige,
just
sige.
interesting point lang dito because 1975 nag-umpisa ang PBA, but the NBA was already in existence for like 30 years already. Am I right, JPM? I just want to know if... So, I just want to know if nung binubuo ba nila yung PBA, were they inspired by the NBA back then? Na parang nung 1974 nagkakaroon na sila ng gulo sa Mika. Then they're starting to see this NBA. Okay, itong NBA pwede kaya siguro natin gawin dito. Paano yung was that possible?
I think that was a role model na rin siguro nangyari ng even back in the Mika that the NBA was the kumbaga parang the benchmark or the gold standard as far as putting up leagues were concerned. It just so happened hindi lang siya professional league. The idea of the professional league came about because the NBA is a pro league, and the fact that there was no other league all over the world that paid players to play basically. So you can say that the PBA was perhaps or maybe is the second professional league all over the world, then the first in Asia. So yun yung naging parang so a lot of their programs, a lot of their regulations, a lot of their principles were designed essentially patterned after the NBA. If you notice pati yung rules nila, I guess that there were a couple of differences. Back then the amateur rules had a 30-second shot clock. Sa PBA 25-second shot clock nagsimula. And the 25-second shot clock was not deliberate. They wanted to do a 24-second shot clock. It just so happened that yung mechanism ng mga timers natin dito hindi allowed ang divisible by 1 second. It had to be divisible by 5 seconds.
That's right.
So, no choice talaga.
No choice talaga. They had to either, but they could have stuck with 30 seconds, diba?
Yeah.
But no, they changed it. They changed the rule. They made it more physical, similar to what we see in the NBA. Maraming let-go situations to provide more excitement and to allow the players to run and gun talaga. No, so that was it was purely for entertainment purposes. At the same time, to make sure that the players actually get paid better.
Yeah. Pero just one more question piggybacking on this issue. JPM and Attorney Charlie can answer this one. Why did you think if the PBA is somehow making a pattern, yung ipinapattern nila sa NBA, yung liga, why do you think they did not make it as parang yung lugar-lugar din? Sabihin natin merong Divisoria Snatchers, Quiapo Pirates, something like that.
We spoke about this
I
before.
think I don't know if I should cut that out. Hopefully people from Divisoria do not hear this, but yeah, we love you people from Divisoria. We love you.
Sorry
Sorry
about that. But just to get just getting to my point, but hindi ginawa ng PBA yun?
Charlie, go.
Ako, palagay ko, it's really because of the prevailing situation at the time already. As Jay said earlier, JPM, it was already a commercial league, di ba? Yung Mika. And then a group of them decided to just break away, di ba? And who were they? They weren't guys who lived in different provinces or different towns, di ba? they were business tycoons, diba?
Mhm.
Diba? So they kept their products pa rin top of mind. That still was the goal, no? To market their products, to gain profit from it, and at the same time provide yung entertainment para sa mga fans in the form of basketball, which they loved. But to get away from the clutches at the time, I guess that's how they looked at it, the clutches of the BAP, the predecessor of the SBP ngayon, yung Basketball Association of the Philippines. So I really, even if the NBA was the standard, I believe, of course, I'm not privy to what was discussed in the boardrooms ng mga panahon na yun, doon sa mga all those big shots who were meeting, those 9 big shots who met and planned the PBA's creation. Pero palagay ko hindi man lang naisip yun
Exactly.
na territorial talaga, produkto talaga at kumpanya nila ang gusto nilang i-market or ibenta nung panahon na yun, and that's how it really started. Of course, as the years went on, we know that notion changed, so that's why other leagues have tried to adopt that. But for some reason, it doesn't seem so feasible, here in this country na gawin yun, na hindi ka firmly entrenched in a certain area, na you have that much money to build an arena. And also there's wala yung pakikipag-ugnayan sa local governments na, 'di ba, you build an arena, and then 'di ba kasi may support, 'di ba, the US professional teams in the 4 major sports in the US, they have community participation talaga from the local governments, 'di ba, from the government. They're funded partially by the government. They have to have approval by the councils of the cities and all that. So it's really just a different situation here.
Agree. And to add to that lang siguro, kasi federal state ang ang US, no. So in other words, they collect their own taxes basically, no? So mas madali yung support talaga. Dati kasi, especially back in the 70s, it was only basically Manila and Cebu, no, which were doing well, which were earning. So in other words, it's totally incomprehensible back then to come up with something similar to the NBA setup. And the general direction was the mere fact that these breakaway people, 9 businessmen, had an objective also, which was to market their products.
Okay, it's good that you guys are talking about the NBA, no? JPM, I'll stick with you. You said that, learned their products, these companies got really good players. How was the loyalty naman of the fans in the PBA? Back then, in the 70s, towards the 80s, they were crazy. If you watch the Ultra, they were back to the rafters. They were sitting down on the court, how could you affiliate? How can you affiliate with a company? How can the fans affiliate to the company?
I think it's more of the personalities, more of the players, right? So naging personality oriented. Yeah, the PBA brought about the development of superstars, no, individual superstars in the So kahit sabihin nilang 5-man team yan, no, but you have very extremely charismatic personalities, no, like Jaworski-Fernandez was probably the best looking guy you can find back then, no. So ang dali ng attraction, and then of course you have likes of Limeng Beng, who was a superstar at Dasal, no, and Bogs Adornado, who's the best player in the country back then, no. So ang daling ang daling ibenta yung mga players, naging personality oriented. And that was also the reason why, since Crispa and Toyota basically generated most of the big talents back then, it was the PBA was known basically as a 2-team tournament, no, or 2-team league, no, Crispa and Toyota. There were a splinter of or a sampling of fans for Tanduay. Basically, marami dyan either kamag-anak or have been Eco fans back in the 60s, no, or even San Beda Red Lions fans, because most of those from San Beda naturally transitioned into Eco, no. You also have the San Miguel followers. Maraming followers sa San Miguel before, especially the Visayans, because they've been ang formula ng San Miguel wasn't to get the best Manila players. Their formula was to get the best Visayan players. That's the reason why you had Paner, Martires, these guys, Estrada. These guys were all part of the original San Miguel group, named Royal True Orange. So may konting fans sila. Eventually, those are the 4. Ultimately, yun yung 4 na teams na sikat noong time na yun. San Miguel, Tanduay, Crispa, and Toyota. UTEX had its own following, pero not so much.
Yeah. Okay, that's very interesting. No, I mean, you said that some of the teams, from the Visayas, and all that. Charlie, I'll go to you if I can see you in this photo. Okay, how was the atmosphere then? No, watching in the PBA. You're a PBA anchor now. Of course, you weren't a PBA anchor then. You would be still a little teenager. How was the atmosphere then? No, we all know the rivalry of Crispa, Toyota. Yun. You're on mute.
I'd like to make it clear, I was not a teenager then, no? I was a little boy. Kaya I'm not,
Kaya ako
medyo
sinabi ko,
mali
little
yung
teenager.
mali yung
Little man.
timeline talaga, no? So, just to make it clear to everybody, ha? Okay, yung nag-umpisa ang PBA, I was too young to even watch. So, my consciousness of the league came about maybe 1978 already when I was about 6-7 years old. But how was it then? It's like the circus came to town every time there was a game. And when I say, and because people now might not be able to relate about the circus anymore, but you know how it is. If you watch the old movies, what circus was there, that is where everybody was. You go to the big top to watch the performers and the animals and all of that. And that's the way it was in the PBA. Basta may game, nandun lahat. Let's face it, there was not too many other forms of entertainment anyway at the time. Wala namang PBL, PSL noong mga panahon na yun. Wala namang, it's not every day you have a boxing match, di ba? There's no internet, there's no video arcades, casinos, maybe, parang wala pa yata nung martial law yun eh. So wala yata mga casino, may casino ba rito, Jay, nung panahon na yun? So there wasn't, di ba? There weren't really places to go for that kind of entertainment. And the quality of basketball that people were enjoying at the time was really, really high, you know? You're talking some of the greatest players in Philippine basketball history. I mean, because you talk about a lot of the older guys, Kaloy Saga and those prior to him. But we all know that the game was very different then, no? It was very mechanical, you know, one-handed set shots and everything like that. You've seen the footage. But by this time, by the 70s, when the PBA came to life, these guys were larger than life. Atoy ko, these 4 MVPs that you see on your screen right now, ibang level maglaro ito mga to. Napakagaling talaga. And you would ooh and on every play. And that's what, really would attract the people. And Toyota and Crispa would not give an inch. And then even the other teams, once you play Toyota or Crispa, you want to win because you want to show na kaya mong sumabay sa diba? Okay, so it just attracted everybody. Grabe talaga. It's hard to explain why, but I guess a big reason is because it was the only source of entertainment at the time na ganyan kalaki yung magnitude at the Big Dome, or it was mostly Big Dome naman or Rizal Memorial at the time, diba? So and then the style of play, these guys were just amazing, fantastic players.
Okay.
Adding to what Charlie mentioned, in 1974, you have to remember, the 2 of those 4 players in those photos, Sonny Jaworski and Box and Adornado, were part of the Philippine national team that went to play in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken, for the
Olympics.
World Cup.
No,
For the World Cup. I'm not sure if it's in Mexico. I forget that. But they competed there. We were beating the likes of Australia and Egypt and the likes. No? So we were like the top team in Asia, and we were beating the top teams of Oceania and Africa. So in other words, what we can say is that, as what Charlie was mentioning, hindi lang kasi because magagaling yung players, but essentially because we were a world-class team. And other countries were actually coming in to tune up in preparation for larger tournaments. So the Soviet Union, believe it or not, the 1980 youth team of the Soviet Union went to the Philippines to play against Crispa and Toyota as a part of their tune-up for the World Youth competitions.
Yes.
And we all know Soviet Union, so how powerhouse the Soviet Union was as a basketball team. Hindi man lang Russia yan, magkakasama yan. Russia, Estonia, Lithuania, lahat yan.
Jay, I'll stick with you, no? You guys mentioned the players and all that. Paano mo naman the fans? Kasi now, fans are more like, "Uy, gwapo yung tao, doon ako susunod." So then, di ba? Then you see them, if you go to like Araneta or MOA, they have the flag, right? They have those banners on the side.
My favorite.
And then right?
Favorite.
Then they scream, and then they close the banner, and then they pick up for the next game. They got another banner for a different team, for a different player, diba? So it's weird how their loyalty is. So
Mhm.
here during the 80s and particularly in the 80s, no, paano
Mhm.
yung fans doon nag-aaway ba din sila sa loob ng ano?
Oh yeah, that's pretty normal. It was more heated back in the 70s, obviously, because of the Crispa Toyota rivalry. No? So talaga mas mainit yan. Polarizing talaga yung Crispa Toyota. Nag-aaway yan sa school. Kapag di Crispa at saka Toyota, yung mga estudyante nag-aaway. Literal na nagsusuntukan yan because of that. Natalong Crispa last night, etc. Ganyan. Ang ano lang, I guess a difference, hindi naman nawala yung yung mga lady fans o kaya yung mga members of every GT na may gusto kay Francis Arnaiz. Yung ganyan. Hindi naman mawawala yan kasi obviously if you look at it, Arnaiz was really a very good looking player during his time, no. But the thing is, I guess they were more into the physicality of the sport
Right.
until there was a time, as you mentioned, back in the 80s nga, when the likes of Alvin Patrimonio, Jerry Codinera, Jojo Lastimosa joined the PBA in 1988. That was a transition period, which Charlie and I wrote a couple of months back for ESPN5, which we can discuss later. No? Ang sinasabi ko lang dito is that it was a transition phase wherein mas maraming casual fans ang nanonood na ng PBA. No 70s to the 80s, medyo hardcore pa yung mga yan eh, yung talagang may hilig. No? Tapos dadadamay na yung casual fans kasi iilan lang naman yung TV sa bahay. So, habang nanonood si tatay, di ba, napipilitan manood si nanay. Parang ganon. Or kaya si ate, ganyan mangyayari. But that was very common. No? But, pero may hardcore lang talaga. But in the by the time when Alvin and the guys came in, iba na talaga. It opened talaga a new breed of fans.
Right. Okay, so Who the Heck Are We is now part of the Globally Ballin network. So just go to the Globally Ballin channel on YouTube and press that bell icon to subscribe to the Who the Heck Are We episodes. Part of the Who the Heck Are We, part of the Globally Ballin channel is the Globally Ballin Network podcast, where they take a surface level view of sports and opportunities around the world. Another show is 5 Minutes With, where they have Nico Salva as one of their guests. I believe he just takes a 5-minute analysis of a game that he played in. And if you know what about volleyball news and the guests and all that, and especially with the PVL that's coming up, check on Hang Time with Denise Dinsai. And I do not see the show. And there you go, Hang Time with Denise Dinsai. You could watch them on YouTube and listen to them on Spotify. Another show is where we have actually our two guests for today. For tonight is An Eternity of Basketball, where they have past guests include Norman Black, Atoy Ko, down to Tim Cone. Now, our sponsors for this show is Chops to Go, New Era, Hinalaban Farms, Jody's Delight, Arfatelli, Cereal Milk Ice Cream, and Cuts Apparel. For Cuts Apparel, for more about them, go to at Cuts Apparel PH, and they have a new line with their cycling gear. If you're a mountain biker or BMX, or also a cyclist, go to their Instagram page. So back to our show. You mentioned kanina, Jay, the JPM, the style of play, tapos siguro no blood, no foul. I think Claro has a question regarding the rules. No, Claro, you could come in, or you have another question.
Yeah, similar to no blood or foul.
Yeah.
Parang just a teaser first for JPM, then Charlie also, given the knowledge you guys have. Yung rules natin, were they always similar to like the NBA, pati yung style of play? Kasi you look at European teams, it's very different. When you see the PBA and the NBA, compare them, you see that there's some similarities. What do you know about how it was?
Charlie.
Okay. Yeah, sobrang similar. I think the influence really of the American style of basketball was primary. Maybe not consciously, but it's maybe it's not something that I want to be like, Dr. J or whoever these other players are. Elgin Baylor, Jerry West. But I guess it's because that's the kind of basketball we were exposed to at the time. Diba? So you tend to just follow what you already see, what you're familiar with. Run and gun talaga ang style sa Pilipinas. Medyo fancy. I think the big difference was really less, obviously no dunks. We don't dunk. Di ba? Walang dunk halos. Pag mag-dunk sa PBA nung 80s, parang wow, pag-uusapan na yan the next day. Nag-dunk si ganyan kagabi isang beses. Simple-simpleng one-handed dunk pa na medyo bumitin pa siya, di ba? Pero nag-dunk siya, so pwedeng pag-usapan yun. But aside from that that aspect of the game when people are playing above the rim, our style has always been very similar for some reason to the NBA style. And as the years went on, as Filipinos started jumping higher and running faster, then Jordan came along and everybody wanted to be like Jordan, which is a great thing that the Europeans resisted. You know? Hindi sila, they didn't want to be like Mike in all aspects. No, you want to be as effective as he is, but you don't have to. Because they can't naman jump and fly the way he does. But that's really just been the way we are. Kasi pinaka-exposure natin. Wala namang, di naman nagpapakita ng EuroLeague noong 80s sa FEN. It was all NBA ang pinapakita or US NCAA, which is really the same thing, di ba? Essentially the same thing with the longer shot clock and possession arrow, di ba? So yeah, yun lang talaga. To answer your question, yes, we pattern ourselves after the American style of play. Is that a good thing? A lot of you are gonna say, a lot of people are gonna say, not anymore, not today, not in today's basketball world, di ba? Diba? It's nice to watch, but you know, it may not be effective. So I don't know. I'll leave that to the 2 million armchair coaches and everything there who are listening, di ba? But you know, pero baka it's counterproductive. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But yes, we follow them.
I hope we don't follow their flopping, you know.
We do already. It happens already. Even in the UAAP, in the NCAA, they already flop. Nandun na yan. So, nandyan na eh. Wala na eh. Diba?
I guess further to that also, we have to understand that basketball was invented back in 1895. And by 1910, we were already the Far East champions. No, and we were undefeated. Like 11 out of 12 championships from 1910 to 1930, the Far East League, which had China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, etc. No? Or Korea pa lang yata nung time na yun, kasi hindi pa yata naghihiwalay yung South and North at that time. We were champions for 11 out of 12 Far East tournaments. So we were dominant. And basically, because why are the people who were teaching us were the Americans.
Right.
You know, we were influenced by the Americans basically because we were still occupying the Philippines. We were still a Commonwealth country at that time. No, and it led on until the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s until America was still the di ba? Sabi nga natin na parang colonial mentality natin. It was still very strong all the way up to the 80s. What more pa nung advent yung advent na napapanood na natin regularly ang NBA sa free television. So Charlie's correct. In other words, the NBA basically is the gold standard as far as Philippine basketball is concerned when it comes to compare.
I'm not trying to speed things up a bit, but
yeah.
I remember watching a Powerade Pilipinas game on TV. So 2008, and pretty much what JPM just said. Oh, the Pinoys were beasts. They were there also, and then they said, and now the rest of the world, they've caught up to the Philippines, or they are now way ahead. What led to us declining or the others overtaking us? For JPM and Charlie, I guess.
Charlie, you want to start? Or
Ikaw na.
Sige.
Ikaw muna.
Okay, well, obviously, the most glaring one is the formation of the PBA. When the PBA opened in 1975, this is what Charlie and I wrote about. We co-wrote something with an article back last year, during the pandemic for ESPN5. We talked about basically what NCC did. In 1975, when the PBA was formed, so nakuha lahat ng mga magagaling na players. Curiously, ano nangyari? From 1975, believe it or not, up to 1988, all the PBA MVPs, except for 1985, which was Ricardo Brown, were all PBA pioneers. Believe it or not, Ramon Fernandez was 35 years old when he became an MVP in 1988. All the Rookie of the Year awardees from 1976 to 1988 were basically role players, except probably for Arnie Tuades, who won in 1979 and Ricardo Brown in 1983. So what does that mean? Walang progression of talent. ang nangyayari. In other words, hindi na de-develop yung players kapag pag-pro sila. Why? Because they were relegated as bench warmers or reserves or probably in the exception of Tuades as a part of the starting unit. Pero hindi sila na de-develop talaga totally. And that was unfortunate because in other words, parang nangyayari ngayon, ang naiiwan na players sa amateur leagues, syempre magagaling na sila like Martes Saldana, Yoyo Villamin, all these guys were there and they were representing our country, but they were not good enough like the predecessors in the PBA era to actually make a dent in the world stage. As a matter of fact, even in the Asian stage, we were like the 4th best team in Asia already by event, behind Japan, China, and South Korea. So ano nangyari? There was a time in the history of Philippine basketball when we actually started believing that we can become world conquerors once more. And that was when the NCC team was formed back in 1981. The same blueprint that Gilas has today, or that Gilas 1.0 copied basically from the 80s. Ano nangyari? Instead of relying, since they cannot rely on the pro players because the pro players were not allowed to play in the in the international scene, they developed their own players. Ang worry ni Danding Cohanco back then was that hindi masyadong magagaling yung amateur players natin. Pag pinalaro mo, kapos. Magagaling sila sa Pilipinas. No? Pero since sila rin yung naglalaban, hindi sila gumagaling at all compared to the world stage. So the very first thing that Danding Cohanco did was, let's bring in foreign talents. Let's naturalize players. Noong time na yun, walang rule ang FIBA kung ilan ang naturalized players na allowed sa isang team. Okay, so Danding Cohanco invested on 8 to 10 American players, all collegiate stars in the NCAA Division 1 and 2. Brought them here in the Philippines. Ano nangyari? Ang logic niya was simple. Fast-track the program, fast-track the transfer of technology. Okay, para gumaling. By 1985, that same NCC team was the best ball club in the Philippines already, beating the likes of the pro teams that had imports. So you can just imagine yung progression from 81 to 85. And then what happened when EDSA Revolution came, the BAP to reassume its position as the primary carrier of the head of the Philippine Basketball Affairs, diniscard nila yung program ng NCC. And that was it. Ang nangyari, nag-pro na ngayon yung mga magagaling natin. Wala na yung mga nasa amateurs, balik na naman tayo sa 4th, sa 5th, sa 3rd, ganun na naman tayo.
Outside of NCC, so there's the PBA, medyo na-affect yung progression ng konti.
Yes, correct.
Do you insert the physicality or physical style of play anywhere there? Mm-hmm. Or, let's be straight, the no blood, no foul?
Mm-hmm.
That's what Claudia said also, yes, no blood, no foul. Mm-hmm. Was it included anywhere in that progression, getting delayed? Because we know that international basketball is physical, but in a different way.
I agree.
From how we do it here.
I guess part of that is a maturation, what you call the maturation process of the young players. So, nung time na yun, NCC was allowed to suit up as a guest team in the PBA. Okay, for 4 different conferences. At nangyari, ginugulpe, minamama talaga yung mga the guys like Alfie Almario, Jong Wichico, ganyan, minamama talaga, kinakawawa talaga. Ganyan, kasi, ganyan, ano ka ha, paggaling ka ha, o sige, ganyan. And you will listen to all our guests on Eternity of Basketball, and you find out, they say, basically, without saying it directly, they will admit it, na ganun nangyayari talaga yun. But that's part of their development eh. Ang nangyari, they were not intimidated anymore. Ngayon, alam na nila kung paano mag-landing, alam nila kung paano iwasan yung paa na nakasabit dun sa landing spot mo, etc. etc. They knew what to do basically. And that's the reason why yung transition nila to international basketball was relatively seamless. Hindi na sila natatakot ngayon pagdating sa physikalan. Charlie, you want to add something?
Yeah, because parang, Claro, you might think na the physicality here na no blood, no foul might have been a detriment to development because since you can get away with all the jostling for position here and the elbowing a bit na walang pito, they do that also internationally. I think it's the other way around. It's so easy to become a nice player. It's easy to become a nice player. Konti lang naman yung talagang one-track mind lang na gusto lang manakit or to be rough and all of that. but the physicality really helps develop. So yes, I think the physicality helps us become better, helps our players become better players. What really held us back is the lack of continuity. Really, after
Agree.
there's always something that comes up. We were winning we went to the Olympics in 72, 68, 72, Worlds in 74, as Jay mentioned earlier. Then the PBA was formed, and hey, I love the PBA. We all know that,
Agree.
but
Agree.
it stopped something. It stopped
Mm.
development because nga, it took away the best players from the pool from which the BAP could pick to compete. And then we developed. So for those losing years, there were some national teams that we had which performed very poorly from 75 to about 80 maybe.
Yeah.
But 81 NCC started, as Jay related already, gumaling na. Pero 86 lalaban na tayo sa Worlds ulit.
Exactly.
Nag-revolution. So pati
Mm-mm.
basketball nadamay nung revolution. Pati yung mga hindi dapat nadamay. So we ask our guests
Yeah.
on your sister show AOB. Sabi namin, what do you think would have happened if natuloy kayo sa 86? Siguro kahit pa paano maganda showing namin. At tingin nyo makakaabot ba kayo sa second round? Baka may chance, di ba? Yung syempre they're being modest and know about it. But we were really heading that way. We would have been, if we lost, it would have been like, remember 2014 Worlds?
Yeah.
Yung mga, we almost beat Argentina, we almost beat Puerto Rico, we almost beat Croatia, di ba? So it probably would have been like that, and that's amazing already. But then there's always something that happens. So and then the lack of continuity that really frustrates everybody.
In the 1985 World Interclub, we beat Marcel de Souza Brazil. We lost to a Marcel de Souza Brazilian team made up of 6 or 7 national team members by 1 point. And then we beat the Italian team made up of around 5 or 6 national team players by 19 points. That's when Samboy Lim exploded with 37 points.
That's the Banco di Roma team, di ba?
That's a Banco di Roma team. They were the best. Banco di Roma team was the best Italian basketball team in Italy.
Sino pa kasama dun sa team na yun?
Hector Calma, Alfie Almario, Tito Lorenzo, Jeff Moore, Debbie Steele, Chip Engelin.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Before leading into Jay De La Cruz, what JPM said, bugbog yung NCC, they're playing against PBA players, and then the exact same happened. Gilas won. Bugbog sila.
Exactly.
These guys weren't scared anymore come the big dance in 2011 FIBA Asia.
Agree. I've been a big advocate of the NCC program ever since 2002. When I started writing for that particular forum on PBA.ph, that was my very first article that I offered in that particular page. Why are we that was after we lost to South Korea in the Busan Games. In the Lee Sang-min. Yeah, with a painful Lee Sang-min 3-point shot. No? And then we were talking about, basically the discussion was like, how should we improve our amateur program? And I brought up the NCC program, I brought up the history, etc., etc. And I kept telling everybody, this is the way to do it. We have to go back to 1981. No, and we cannot have a different set of PBA players given 1 month or 2 weeks to practice. That does not work anymore. We are not like Americans.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's basically
even the Americans it's not working for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not.
and that's the reason why in 2008 when we lost, or I think that was 2009 when the Power 8 team lost to Gilas 1.0 by like 19 points, if I'm not mistaken. I was already telling everybody, we do not need a team of the best players. We need the best ball club. We need the best team. And that includes very good coach. It doesn't matter if it's a Filipino or an international coach. Basta they're together for quite some time. Let them play internationally. Let them hone their skills in the PBA. And yun, matrain sila, mabugbog sila doon. Okay lang yun. Ganyan. At least, diba, they're in shape all year round.
Yeah. Time and again, that system has always been proven talaga. They're very effective. But I want to go to Charlie. Since I think this is the last question that I'm going to get with regards to the rules. Attorney Charlie, I just want to, can you give us a general assessment kung paano yung naging yung generational change ng mga rules? For example, nagsimula tayo sa 70s ng ganito. Then, pagdating ng 80s, ito na yung mga rules and the players became like this, the game became like this. Punta tayo ng 90s, nagkaroon ng pagbabago sa rules and the game became like this up until makarating tayo dito. Can you give us that kind of generational assessment of those each decade sa PBA?
Okay. I think, well, the biggest change now, even if the effect parang it took a long time bago talagang nagka-impact sa laro, is introduction of the three-point line, obviously, no? In the, di ba, kasi sa amateur, wala namang three-point line dati. Siguro 80s na, pwede natin sabihin, di ba, Jay, mga 80s na talaga yung three-point line, eh. Di ba, 79 sa NBA, tapos 80, 81 na sa PBA, and then sa amateur, even later on, di ba, UAAP, anong year ba pinasok ang three-point line?
84, 85 yata.
Oh, di ba, 84, 85, di ba? So that changed a lot of things when shooters came around. But then there's a thing about the defenses rin. If you're talking about pro, di ba, obviously, there was illegal defense before, di ba? 3-second defensive alignment, mga ganyan, mga rules na ganyan that you couldn't, go to certain spaces on the floor. If you're on the defensive end, you'd be called for a technical foul, free throw would be given to the other team, and then ball possession. So that was eventually taken away. We know that now you can play zones, di ba? You can play zones already. That took a long time for that. And then hand checks, the way you can defend in the post, diba? The arm bars and all of that. And then what constitutes interference with the shooter, diba? So those rules have been changing every now and then, diba, na sometimes may pag tinama mo after the shot, hindi na pipituhan, but then they change it back na basta tinamaan mo, pipituhan ka and all of that. So all of that either contributes to development or regression, depending, I guess, on who's playing, on what style suits a certain team, a coach, di ba? So depende yung mga yan. Obviously, like I said, but obviously, laki na impact nung the 3-point shot for me is ibang level yung impact ngayon sa style of play right now, di ba? Because I guess the defenses naman, ever since we're kids naman, just guard the guy in front of you. Di ba? Yun naman ang sinasabi. Kung sino malapit sa'yo, bantayan mo. Pag walang malapit sa kanya, may problema rin yung depensa, di ba? So yun yung mga basic things like that. But obviously right now, scientifically, coaching has really created angles sa laro ng basketball that were not present before. Imagine, how tight they can do pick and pop and pick and roll and all these things, and how many times, the way Reggie Miller used to run from one side to the other and fight two screens. Now there's a third screen, so it's a harder time to make it to the point that you want to go to. So things like that. So let's put it this way: walang the change in the rules, Jay. We cannot say for sure if it benefited or was a detriment to whoever team, whether Philippines or NBA team or PBA team, no. Pero definitely yung changes na yan. Kung sino nakapag-adapt, siya yung successful. Ganun lang ang bottom line para sa akin doon.
Yes.
I hope I answered your question somehow.
Yes, that's a very good point. Especially funny you mentioned about the three-pointers. First thing pa yon, because I'm going to ask JPM about the history of the three-point shot in the PBA. I mean, I always have to go back to that horseshoe three-point line that really looked ridiculous to me up until now. I cannot imagine. Pero can you tell us about the history of the three-point shot here in Philippine basketball in general?
Well, I'm trying to find out also, but one of the reasons why the PBA decided to execute that particular horseshoe type of angle was that if you extend it all the way to the flanks, no, you would basically there won't be too much space anymore for a foot to be implanted in that remaining space. So I don't know if it was our basketball court the width of the basketball court shorter. I don't know. I don't understand as well. But that was a premise. That was a premise behind it. No? A year after they replaced it, they corrected it and they made sure that it extended all the way to the sides. That was a primary weapon that was used also by NCC. We have to remember back in 1981, there were only a few players who used the three-point shot as a weapon. We had Bogs Adornado, we had Atty, we had Freddy Ubalde, etc. These guys were shooting from the perimeter pa rin. The one guy, and just to give you an idea of how advanced this guy was, when he was playing, who used that as a weapon, was Sonny Jaworski. Jaworski had established his record of 8 3-point shots in a finals game against UTEX. In a finals game.
Wow. That's
Imagine.
Steph Curry level yan. Steph Curry.
That's 8 out of 11 3-point shots. And it was impressive, man. That was and I think that was one weapon that NCC used. Because why? Because we didn't have the height. No, we understood the fact that China will always have their 7-footers. The South Koreans were already using that as a weapon. They extended themselves further from 20 feet. They went beyond 22 feet already to score 3-point shots. We did the same thing. And when people were asking me the question, was this the first time that Gilas, so the Philippine team, beat Korea in the 3-point area? When Gilas beat them a few weeks or a week ago, diba? We scored 14 trays. South Korea had 10. Actually, we were beating them already back during the NCC time. We had more trays than the Koreans back then. We were using that as a primary weapon, despite the fact that we had Jeff Moore and Dennis still inside the paint. So, tama yung sinabi ni Charlie, the 3-point shot is really a major change in the rules, no? But also, ang underlying factor sa change of rules na yan was very, very basic. Ang primordial interest ng PBA was entertainment. And that's the reason why Claudia kept mentioning no blood, no foul, because that was what the PBA fans wanted. Which is what Rudy Sadu did in 1986. He established a no harm, no foul policy. And then
borderline violence.
Interesting.
And then after that, in 1990, natalo tayo sa Asian Games. Sa China, sa Hiroshima, natalo tayo. Ano nangyari? Nakita natin, hindi pala effective yung no harm, no foul sa international arena. So we had to make the adjustments again. Given the fact that the PBA was already committed to suiting up for the national team in every Asian Games, quadrennially.
Okay. Okay, wait. That's my dog playing in the background. So you can see he's playing with my chinelas. Okay, no, Jay, I'll stick with you. You mentioned that the 3-point line was one of the changes, no? I remember there was also trades that affected the PBA then, no? Especially entertainment. I know that you had to trade a superstar to another team with another superstar.
Pretty much,
and there was also a shift from fans then, no? So, oh my gosh. So I have to finish my question so my dog stops barking. So how did the trades affect the PBA also, no?
It was good back then. Charlie would know, no? Because obviously, as a Tanduay fan and a Ramon Fernandez fan, ang nangyari is nag-combine yung dalawa in 1985 when Fernandez eventually joined the Rum Makers in 85. It was good for the PBA because it brought excitement. It brought a different flavor altogether when you had players suiting up for wearing different uniforms. And I've always said that the biggest trade that has happened in the PBA historically were the two Gidaben-Fernandez trades that happened in 85 and 88, bar none. I mean, you can say about the Jericho Diniera, Andy Siegel trade. You can describe about the June Limpot and the Marlo Aquino trade. Yeah, part and parcel, maybe. But there was nothing as blockbuster as the Gidaben-Fernandez trade because you're talking about the top 2 best big men, the top 2 players in the league back then. And that changed a lot. I mean, in other words, a lot of fans of Ramon Fernandez moved to Tanduay. A lot of the Crispa fans who were cheering for Abby Gidaben moved to Manila Beer and to his other teams.
So paano yan yung fans? Sila din, kanya magkakampi sila dati, tapos biglang nag-trade. Sila naman magpapatayan. Di ba?
That's basically the nature of what I was saying earlier. No? Personality-oriented na naging ang mga teams. So they were not cheering basically for one team. Marami pa rin ganun ha. I'm not saying na pero marami pa rin nag-shift because of the players, their favorite players moving to another team. Nung Toyota nag-disband, you can imagine yung hati. No, a lot of people went to Ginebra because of Jaworski. A lot of people went to Beer House because of Fernandez. Yeah. No, even more with Crispa because talagang hinatin the Commissioner Tommy Manotoc yung Crispa players to 4 different teams. So talagang gulong-gulo yung mga Crispa fans. So I was a Crispa fan. I didn't know who to root for. That was the problem. My favorite player was Philip Cesar and Atoy ko. Ko was with Manila Beer. Philip Cesar was with Phil. Sino kakampihan ko dito?
Lalo pag naglaban sila, no?
Oo, just nakahamot na lang eh. So eventually, ano na rin, because for whatever reason, he never got Billy Ray Bates, and Bates was my favorite importer. Is my favorite importer of all time.
Oh, God.
That's when I transitioned to Ginebra. And it just so happened na si Jaworski, hindi ko pinaka-hated na player sa Toyota. Ang pinaka-hated na player ko, si Fernandez.
What?
Kasi siya yung pumapatay sa Crispa. Hindi si Jaworski ang pumapatay sa Crispa eh. Si Fernandez eh. Crispa fan ako. Kaya ganito ako dyan kay ano. Tapos pipi ko nila niya sa gidaben. Talo na Crispa. That was the story there. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't hear that often now, no? In the PBA. You don't, you know? So, paano yan, Jay Mercado? So, kapag nag-disperse yung Crispa fans are yung players, kung naglalaban yung favorite players mo, sino kagalit mo? Siguro you just go to the mirror and kausapin mo sarili mo.
Well, that was a hard part. But eventually, medyo nahihirapan ako kumapi sa beer house doon. Kasi kakampi ni Atoy ko, si Ramon Fernandez.
Hate mo si Ramon Fernandez.
So, hindi ako makano. So, medyo naglilin ako sa Shell. Tapos nag-runner up ang Shell nung 1985 All-Filipino. So, you had Cristobal by Adornado, by Bernie Fabiosa and Philip Cesar there. So, mas madali kumapi sa Shell ng time yun. What more pa na dumating UP guys? No, yung Paras, Bagsanok, no? Siyempre, gusto ko na Shell talaga. They were my second favorite team back then.
So, siguro kalaban mo si Charlie noon kasi Charlie's favorite player is Mon Fernandez.
Exactly. Well, hindi pa kami nag-uusap ni Charlie noong time na yun.
Pero nung 86 kasi, Ginebra fan ka, Billy Ray Bates, di ba?
Yeah.
Ako, Tanduay fan ako. Naglalaban naman yung Ginebra at Tanduay ng mga panahon na yun, di ba? So,
mainit
nalaban
yun.
kami noon.
Yeah.
So,
That was perhaps the first rivalry after Crispa Toyota in the PBA.
Okay. So may competitive balance then. Malakas ang competitive balance in the PBA then.
That is the signature move of Coach Tommy Monotok. And you have, I'm going to give this a credit to where it's due. No? Deputy Commissioner Tommy Monotok was appointed Deputy Commissioner back in 84. Kasi si Mariano Naninyenko was basically a figurehead na lang. Wala siya masyado alam sa basketball. But he was put there because he was a military man. But he didn't know much about basketball operations. That's the reason why he got Tommy Monotok, who just resigned as head coach of Crispa. And one of the things that Tommy Monotok did back in 84 was he wanted to make sure na balansyado ang liga. Kasi walang mangyayari kung Crispa Toyota lag lang mag-champion. So, and he knew it personally. He had first-hand experience because he was coaching UTEX and San Miguel. No, hirap na hirap siya kalabanin ang Crispa Toyota noong time na yon. So by 1985, when Crispa disbanded, siya ang nag-promote ng move na ikalat ang Crispa players. Huwag ibigay lahat yan sa Shell. Mangyayari ng Shell na naman na magiging Crispa naman. And true enough, the resurgence of the PBA, the best years of the PBA happened from 1986 to 1989 or 1992, 93, etc. In terms of population, popularity, box office success, etc. During Rudy Salud's time, basically because every single team was capable of winning a championship back then. So from 1986 to 1996, out of the 7 teams back then won championships.
Right.
Plus, I'll just add on to that. No, I'm sure you guys might know it already, the 3 hosts. But for those who don't know it, aside from distributing the Crispa players and then the Toyota players had been distributed to a couple of teams, there was a rule instituted by the PBA that certain players, they named certain players, they could not play on the same team. Diba? Fernandez, Gidaben, Manny Victorino, Philip Cesar, Yoyo Villam, initially Philip Cesar, then Yoyo Villam. They could not be on the same team because you didn't want, these are all the best big men in the league. 2 of them couldn't be on one team. Kailangan hiwalay silang lahat. Para may big man, at least 5 of the teams or 4 of the teams in the league na magaling talaga. Diba? So, bawal sila. Sila lang pwede to trade for each other. That's why Gidaben and Fernandez were traded for each other and no one else. Gidaben could have been a Fernandez Victorino trade. That would have been allowed. But only sila lang yung pwede. Diba? So imagine, the parity, may big guy ka na agad. Hindi lahat ng higante nasa isang team. Hindi lahat ng magagaling na shooter nasa isang team. So they were trying to do that back then at the time. So that contributed to league parity as well.
Exactly. Which was the inspiration of the, Commissioner Noli Ayala when he put up the RTL rule, the restricted trade list rule back in 2003. If you
Yeah.
remember, di ba, you were supposed to assign one player from your
Yes.
team na yun lang pwede ka trade doon sa restricted trade list ng ibang team.
Oh. Okay, Jay De La Cruz?
Yes. Yeah. Familiar yung RTLN. I've heard about it before. Na there were a couple of opportunities na nakakwento ko si Kam Noli that he mentioned about those rules na RTL, which is apparently hard to do right now because I don't I it's not it's just paraphrasing what I heard na mahirap na gawin because of the sister teams.
Yes.
I just want to know to Attorney Charlie or JPM, do you have any recollection of how the sister teams here in the PBA started? Para sino ba talaga yung pinakaunang sister team dito sa PBA?
Jay, start mo yun. Jay, start mo yun. Di ba, early on pa lang, nagka-parang sister teams na yan. Di ba? Start mo yun.
Believe it or not, 1978 started. Okay? Toyota at saka Philman Bank. At that time, 7-Up closed shop. So they were down to 8 teams. Philman Bank, which is a bank owned by the Silveria family who also owns Delta Motor Philippines, decided to join the PBA. So anong nangyari noon, nag-finals a very first conference sa Philman Bank, since they were considered as one of the weaker teams back then. Merong rule ng PBA para may parity ulit na pinapayagan nila ma-reinforce ng isang import sa All Filipino Conference ang weak teams.
Ooh,
which was
handicap.
may handicap rule. Lahat all Pinoy except for Philman Bank and another team that had Cisco Oliver, Mariwasa yata yung Pagnapilia. Tama, Mariwasa or Great Taste, dalawa lang naman yan eh. Okay? So, ano nangyari? Philman Bank had Big Billy Robinson. Billy Robinson was one of the more established imports back then. He was 6'6", hindi na makataasan, so pwede bantayan ni Gidaben at ni Fernandez. Ang nangyari was, Robinson was also the reason why Mariwasa placed second in the 1977 All-Filipino. So, siya rin yung nag-reinforce naman sa Philman Bank noong 1978 sa All-Filipino rin, which led to Philman Bank placing second behind sister team Toyota. So that was a history of the sister team. Marami pang iba yan, pero kasi hindi masyado naramdaman yan, lalo na panahon ng San Miguel Añejo. They were sister teams already back then. But they were probably the biggest rivals also. Why? Because of the Fernandez-Jaworski feud. Number two, because Jaworski didn't want to yung sabihin, ayaw niya pakialaman ng management yung team niya. He wanted complete independence. Kanya. So, I mean, those are the things that, ngayon lang talaga kasi, parang objective. And in a way, I would like to say that siguro, quote-unquote, kasalanan ni Ron Jacobs yan. Kasi, si Ron Jacobs, nung time na nakuha na nila yung Ginebra from Jaworski, naging consultant siya ng Ginebra, naging consultant pa siya ng San Miguel. So, nung nag-finance yung dalawa ng 2001 All-Filipino, nasa broadcast panel na si Ron Jacobs.
I was about to ask that question, the coaching consultancy, because isa pa yung bagay na yun, prevalent din ngayon na there's already a head coach, tapos meron pang coaching consultant that at the same time is barking out instructions to the players. I mean, if you're trying to connect what is happening to the PBA right now, pero talagang history, di ba, Claro?
Yeah. Consultant, active consultant, there's different roles. Yes. You name them.
Ako, I have a question, no? Yung Jaworski rivalry, Jaworski-Fernandez rivalry, how bad was that? Or how effective was that rivalry to the story of the PBA?
Charlie, sinulat natin yan. Sige.
Sobrang laking bagay nun. Kasi the way that they portray it now, at least those who were privy to it allegedly, teammates of theirs and all of that, and even Mon Fernandez himself, they downplay it now. It wasn't anything that serious, but in the eyes of the fans, it really created a divide, and that divide, of course, what diba? I mean, syempre, a big part of the whole thing, it's a competition. Bakbakan yan, di ba? Gera yan for some, di ba? For some, gera yan. For some, it's simple. It's just nice competition. But however you look at it, it's one against the other. Yeah. So once there are personalities to lead the teams or the factions against each other. It provides for more drama. It provides for more entertainment. There's more at stake for in every game. 'Di ba? Wag lang matalo basta sila yung kalaban. Matalo na kay ganito,
Correct.
wag lang kay ganyan. 'Di ba? So
Yeah.
things like that, and the fans really they played it up. I remember the 1986 awarding for the Mythical Five. For the Mythical Five, and these two players were in the Mythical Five, and Mon Fernandez eventually was the MVP. They were called one after the other, so normally you have to stand beside each other in the line. Diba? First guy was called, second guy was called, and then I think Simon, and then si Jawo, but when they were forming the line, nagtabi sandali, pero pag flashback ng camera, nasa kabila na yung isa. Lumipat sa kabila ng line na. And then you could see the crowd reacting pag pakita ng picture na yun. Talagang, di ba? Ayaw magtabi. And that excites people. I mean, let's face it. I mean, call us sadista, masochista, ewan ko, whatever term you want to use. We take pleasure in watching conflict, and if we can add to it, we will. Diba? If it makes it more exciting, papayag tayo doon. So definitely,
was making faces,
he was making faces. Parang katabi ko, diba? There's a picture of Jawa making a face beside him. Diba? So, to answer your question directly, Claude, malaking bagay because it kept the Toyota Crispa, the enthusiasm of the fans from Toyota Crispa days now became a Jaworski-Fernandez thing because Toyota Crispa were gone. So bagamat Toyota silang dalawa, meron pa ring dahilan, di ba? Which carried itself into the 90s already when Añejo and Pure Food started going at it already. Which if you look at it was also a Fernandez Jaworski team because playing coach ng Jaworski ng Añejo, Ginebra, then sa Pure Food started out with Mon, di ba? And then all of that, despite the fact that he left. So sobrang laki bagay. Di ba? Talagang thank you to Jaworski and Fernandez in a way that people think Bird and Magic for the NBA. We think Mon and Sunny for how the PBA progressed as well during that time.
Actually, we'd like to say na we wrote about this. So we apart from the NCC program, isa sa mga sumalbat talaga sa PBA was that rivalry. Because at that time, Crispa and Toyota, when it disbanded, a lot of people were predicting the PBA would fold up. And at the same time, that was a time in 1985 when our economy was was extremely down, and a lot of teams were disbanding. So when Jaworski and Fernandez eventually had started their feud in 1984, imagine mo, nang makakamatay na ni Ninoy, bagsak ekonomiya natin, our GDP was way was negative, etc. There were in 1984 there were 2 all Filipino conferences. Kasi they cannot even afford an import to bring in an import for the second conference.
Correct.
Jay, I hope that doesn't. Hopefully, history doesn't repeat itself now. No,
Exactly.
parang it's right.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
So, with
I know
that,
what you're talking about.
I know we were talking about it earlier. But, so I know. So, Jay, I'll stick with you. Is that what you think that's lacking now in the PBA? Is that kind of rivalry? We mentioned that there's sister teams. We have a lot of those sister teams. That certain rivalry, parang kulang in terms of the PBA. Do you think if we had that kind of story or that kind of rivalry in the PBA, do you think it will bring back the fans, the bumps in their seats, so to speak?
Perhaps. I remember when Christian Stan Hardinger was taken in by San Miguel from Kia Motors back then in 2017. I wrote an article in my blog regarding whatever I theorized basically. And Charlie and I were in constant communication back then. No? I theorized back then that what the PBA, what Chito Narvaez was doing was, and since he cannot generate parity anymore, he wanted to bring back the Toyota Crispa rivalry featuring Ginebra and San Miguel. So it was okay. So he felt that probably back in 75 to 1984, when Crispa Toyotas were there, the PBA was thriving. Nowadays, it's going to be very difficult for him to actually put a balance in the competition by putting parity among all the teams. So why not just make these 2 teams, San Miguel and Ginebra, being the 2 most popular teams anyway, the most even more powerful, and come up with a rivalry wherein the two will probably be meeting each other every time in the finals of every single conference. In other words, ano mangyayari ngayon? People will now gravitate to these two teams na lang, forgetting about Rain or Shine, forgetting about TIA, forgetting about Blackwater, etc., etc. That's basically that was my theory, especially when Stan Hardinger came in, and now you know that Stan Hardinger is with Ginebra. You know that Junmar remains with San Miguel. You know that there's who's a big guy at ano ngayon? Abueva now is with Pure Foods. No, yeah, you start figuring out maybe there's a freeway rivalry now being formed among the San Miguel teams, maybe because that's the way to save the PBA. I feel that's a fury basically.
That's your theory. That's your theory. I can't. I was gonna ask Charlie, but you know.
Charlie, go.
Yeah.
Okay, so Clara or Jay, do you guys have any question? If not,
I just have one last question for each of you guys. I'll start with Attorney Charlie. Since we're talking about PBA history here, for sure, I'm sure you'd agree that current fans right now should have a greater appreciation of the history of the PBA. I mean, kung saan ba nag-umpisa ito, so that fans right now could understand everything that's going on. Do you agree, Attorney Charlie, or you have something? How are you going to say it?
I'm sure you know my answer. No, I think I've been recognized. I suppose is the only word I can think of right now. As one of the persons who, when I commentate the games, I always infuse a little bit of history in what's going on. Diba? I say that a certain player now plays like somebody from the 70s, not just from the 90s, not just from the 2000s. Diba? I go all the way back to the 70s. Parang si ganyan yan.
Baker's dozen.
Yeah, diba? And then the terminology I use, a lot of my expressions come from the guys that I grew up with, like Smokin' Joe and Pingoy Pengson and all of that. So, yes, I believe that the sense of history has been lost on a lot of these young ones, and that is why we formed, or we created an eternity of basketball. Diba? And I hope that some of these young players and personalities, even those who are recently retired in the past 10-15 years, I wish they would watch it. I wish a lot of these Filipino-American players, who came over later in their lives, who knew nothing about the PBA before they came to be drafted, would watch it. The problem is they might not understand a lot of the conversations because it's in Tagalog, diba? Maybe we should put the captioning or something, but they can see how was it like back then, and how did rivalries happen? How diba, were they working? How did they reach how was it to be a bench warmer? Because not all our guests naman are super fast. Yeah. So even in the way I commentate and in the way I talk to people, it's history talaga. History, because you cannot go forward without looking backwards. Especially in this type of league. Very storied ang history natin. I mean, even now, people, sinong top player na ganito, they'll name people who are playing today, and you cannot do that. Top 40 players. People know. I've said it. I question some of the selections there, diba? And no offense to anybody who's been chosen, because it's not their fault that they were chosen, diba?
Yeah.
But I question some of the people who chose them, because doon muna tayo sa mga dati. Huwag tayong dito ngayon, because diba? And because they're deserving. I'm not just saying because they're retired, you put them there and they were good. So So history, Jay, laki sa akin yan. And these young guys really need to know about it. These younger ones. Willing naman kami ni Jay makipagkwentuhan sa kanila lahat. May mga like today, nag-session ng mga PBA rookies yata, di ba? There was a session today.
I missed that.
May orientation sila, no? So they're told about financial management, mental health, good grooming, etc., etc. History. Pwede kaming kunin na speakers dyan, pag-usapan natin, ano ba tong liga nito, sino ba yung mga nauna sa kanila, di ba? At kilalanin nila. When Bogs Adornado became assistant coach of Blackwater, I was telling some of the young guys, kilala nyo ba yan? Di ba? Kung sino yan? Di ba? Gusto nyo mag-improve ang shooting nyo? Makipagkwentuhan kayo, makipag-shooting kayo sa kanya. Do you even know how good, how amazing this guy was?
Exactly.
Diba? He'll outshoot all of you right now, right today. Sabi ko sa kanila. Diba? So really, sabi nung isa sa akin talaga, subukan mo si Bogs pa. Diba? So ganun.
Yeah.
So yan ang sagot ko sa iyo, partner. Diba?
Yes. I agree.
Si Claro's just
JPM.
quiet. Kasi parang
Claro's just
siya yung taong
Oh.
kailangan mong turuan ng
So
history ng
creative.
PBA.
Oh.
Nandito lang kami. Always willing.
Oh.
Sige, Jay, ikaw naman.
Claro's just soaking in it. Pero JPM, here's a big question for you. If one day matayo ang PBA Museum,
Mhm.
what are the things that you would want to see there?
Okay. Ang unang-una, syempre, I was part of the, I don't know if you're familiar with the cable channel Pinoy
Extreme.
Yeah.
I love
And the
that channel.
And the reason why there was a Pinoy Extreme, why it became popular, because we were playing past PBA games, right?
Yes.
The PBA games back then. I was part of that production crew. Okay, I was a creative consultant. Basically, I was the one selecting the game. I was providing the trivia. I was the one who actually chose. Sige, kunin natin Ginebra NCC yung history of Never Say Die game. So we had to look for all these. No, unfortunately, I was given a list in single space, size 12 font, na ganito kakapal, long bond paper, from 1978 to the present, at that time 2011. So ganun karaming inventory of games sila. Unfortunately, I was trying to get back, I retrieved the 70s and 80s games. Yung iba, inanay na, yung iba, inamag na, etc. Maraming in other words, hindi na pwedeng ipalabas. As a matter of fact, yung Never Say Die game nga ni Jaworski, 1985, hindi na natapos eh. Yeah, hindi na natapos kasi kinain na ng amag yung dulo, yung tape. Okay, so that's one. Number two, so that's one. And I tried to look for the classic games talaga. The Billy Ray Bates last second dunk against Manila Beer in Game 2 of the finals. I was looking for the Rudy Distrito buzzer beating final shot in Game 7, 1991. Wala lahat, nawawala. May nagnap. In other words, apparently somebody took it, didn't return it anymore. No. Our job back then was to make sure that we digitize everything and we put it on CDs or DVDs. No? And then, ang nangyari is, ang rule namin with the PBA, part of the arrangement with the PBA, is that we will provide them with a copy of the DVDs. Those are the same games that you see on PBA Rush now.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Those DVDs that we actually generated back in 2011 were the same ones that we give to them. Apparently, the PBA doesn't do production. They don't digitize the tapes. No, unfortunately, wala yata sila section to do that. That's one thing that I want to see in the museum. In other words, you want to see all the best games there. You just click, etc. I want to see excerpts of vidcaps of this particular game. Yun ang unang gusto makita. Number two, siguro, I'm guessing yung unang bola ni nalaro noong 1975, the first basketball. Yeah, those are the two things that I want to see. No, and of course, the third one will be the first PBA trophy given to Toyota in 1975, in the 1975 first conference. Those are the three things that I want to see in that. Kasi madali na yung jerseys eh. Marami na nagre-reproduce ng jerseys eh. So madali na yan eh. Ang gusto ko talaga makita yung tunay na talaga, na mahit natin.
Wow, that's pretty good. Okay, so last question. So we'll go that to Attorney Charlie. So if you were done, just kidding. No, I won't put you in the spot. That no, I won't do that. I'll edit that out.
Go that path. I know.
Disband na ako ng who the heck are we?
Dili kayong lahat dyan. Quiet.
Then I'm not gonna ask that. So no, thanks, Jay. In terms of the museum, all that. With you, Charlie. This is not. Siguro this is siguro the last question. No? Do you think that social media also helped in terms of? I can't say it helped decline the PBA or is helping the PBA. Kasi before in the 1980s, walang social media back then, pero ang dami pa rin na nanonood.
Yep.
And then now, so. If there was social media, mas okay pa sana manood. But then, wala.
Well, boom or bane naman ng social media, di ba, in everything now. Di ba, for promotion and then for quick info and all of that, social media is great, but it's also harsh. No? It's a very harsh realm. And it affects players. It promotes a lot of... kasi before, there was a lot of friendly argumentation between... fans among fans. Now it's not it's really just bashing and trolling and disrespecting people, lakas makialam ng mga tao and opinions are not respected. Social media has definitely helped the league in lots of ways. The internet in general has helped the league in lots of ways because there's access. It may have damaged as far as viewership is concerned because you can get updates anyway on social media. So why do you need to watch? Things like that. So like I said, it's boom or bane. People, I guess, but it's really up to people because it's people who tweet. Social media doesn't operate by itself. So if people are a bit more responsible and more respectful and reasonable, palagay ko, social media could benefit us all. But unfortunately, hindi ganon, di ba? Lahat naman tayo nakakaranas ng ganyan araw-araw. Lahat naman kayo, you're online, you guys. So you know how that goes. So my answer there would be sana, kaso hindi. Yun. Diba?
Right. Wow. Okay. So we're already an hour and 24 minutes into the show. Normally we just stick to an hour, pero the boys were texting me like, oh, keep going. Dapat nga may break kami, Jay Mercado. Dapat may break kami. I'm gonna have to record and then slot it in later in the middle. Like I'm gonna have to find a good time to put it in. But Jay Mercado, we gave Attorney Charlie Cuna the privilege to say thank you to his fans. No episode 45 to his fans, no?
I don't have one.
No, but
meron na yan.
Paano kaya ako? Paano po ako?
See, you got like three.
Paano po ako?
See, pati si Claro. But Jay, we would like to give you the time for you to say thank you to your family, to your 8 siblings, no? And then
9 siblings actually.
9 siblings, sorry, 9 siblings and sampo. Ako kami 11. O yan. So nanalo ko sa'yo ng 1. Okay, so Claro, you could put. Sige, Jay.
All right.
For yours, JPM.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. One of the things that I treasure is basically how basketball has evolved. And one of the things sa namin, ako personal passion ko to. I don't earn from this particular itong ginagawa kong na to, no? But it's really more of sharing whatever knowledge that you have, no? And it's a pay forward thing because practically my childhood and my teen life was dominated by Philippine basketball, particularly the PBA. So this is one small way of me paying it forward to the league and to the sport that I love. So that's the reason why I talk about it. I write about it. I whenever I get invited to any programs or your show, etc. For example, or kahit sa Eternity of Basketball, kahit last minute yan, tatawag si Charlie sa akin, wala si Noel, ganito. Sige, bahala na, ganyan, pasok na. Salang na. Ganyan. Those are all kasi it's really a passion on my end. One of the things that I want people to learn, especially the young ones, is how valuable yung predecessors ng yung mga past sports heroes natin are giving credit. We ever wondered why sa Eternity of Basketball, a lot of our guests actually look forward to guesting on our show? It's because for 2 hours, they reminisce and they actually get back the opportunity of being under the league lights once more. Na sila ulit yung star and they talk about everything that they accomplished back. It's something that they can share to their apos, to their anaks, etc. We didn't see them play. That's basically what we want to And part of the sharing process is this. I hope we were able to do so. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thanks. JPM for that. We'll put you guys back on backstage.
Okay.
Then we'll call you back in, huh?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, claro, it's the first time aside from the Senator Mig Zubiri, hindi ka nagsalita.
No, I'll tell you guys, I'll jump in now. I love history, I love sports, so you put it all together. I love my history class back in school, so you put that in a blender, and that's what we had right here. So everything, NCC onwards, yep, you name it. Makes you appreciate things even more, of course. Claudia?
Jay?
Alam mo yung kasabihan na ang hindi lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makakarating sa paroroonan. Actually, it really applies everywhere, including here sa Philippine basketball. I mean, look, where we are right now in the current situation of Philippine basketball, we are making progress in the national team once again. And the PBA will always have that history, that 70s, that Toyota Crispa rivalry during that magnificent 80s run na sila lang yung pinapanood ng tao up until to the 90s na nandun yung combo ng masasabi nating charismatic players plus the skills, di ba? The PBA will always have that go-to spots in order to masabi natin na ibalik yung mga fans sa kanila, di ba? I mean, maraming options yan. Attorney Charlie said it earlier, social media, daming options. But again, the PBA will always find a way to bring back those glory days and ang dami nilang reference doon. Kaya yan yung importansya na malaman natin as a fan and as everyone who loves sports, who works with sports, importante na malaman natin yung pinanggalingan natin.
Yeah. Whoever does not look at the past might repeat the history. Hopefully this year we don't do that. So ako, I
Amen.
right? So ako, I'm one fan of history as well, especially when it comes to the PBA. And when JPM was talking about the rivalry of Fernandez and Jaworski, and how it ended was an all-star game. Nag-shake hands pa sila. Ganun. And, that was the drama. And I think that's what the PBA kind of lacks in terms of bringing back the fans is that story. They have to have a rivalry story. And hopefully the theory of JPM works well. No? And in terms of kay Charlie, I'm one fan when he talks about history. If you listen to what he says, he'll always slot in something about history. And especially kapag kasama niya si Coach RG. Yan! Forever na sila magsasalita. Anyway, okay, so Who the Heck Are We is part of the Globally Ballin network. If you want to get to know more about Who the Heck Are We, just subscribe to the bell button by clicking the bell button. And Who the Heck Are We, again, is part of the Globally Ballin podcast channel. Part of the Globally Ballin podcast channel is the Globally Ballin podcast, a show where we take a surface level view of sports and opportunities around the world. Another show is called 5 Minutes With, where they actually have Nico Sava as one of the guests, where they talk about a game and they analyze it within 5 minutes. Another is Hang Time with Denise Tensai, all about volleyball. You could also listen to them on Spotify. The last but not the least is An Eternity of Basketball, where they talk about the golden era of Philippine hoops. This show is sponsored by Chops to Go, New Era, Hinuluban Farms, Georgie's Delight, Arfatelli, Soulful Ice Cream, and Cuts Apparel. Part of a Cuts Apparel line is their cycling line. So if you want to get to know more about Cuts Apparel, just go to their Instagram at Cuts Apparel PH. Again, thank you so much. This is episode 54?
54.
54, episode 54. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Who the Heck Are We? It's Caro Manzano, Jay Del Cruz. My name is Claudia Perrine. Thank you very much.